Meryl Nass kindly joins us again. She, of course, is a MIT-trained scientist, clinician, physician who was involved in biological warfare investigations. You can follow her on X, Nass Meryl, Nassmeryl, and also on X, door_to freedom, and merylnass.substack.com. We're going to talk a little bit about public health and overreach and emergencies and what is going on with this. It's so slowly coming into focus. And we're going to switch over to big pharma, farm with an FARM, a little bit of agriculture conversation and where things are off the rails there. And we will be joined at that point by Alison Morrow, who, of course, is farming and attempting to do this in a biologically sustainable way. And she's got a lot of information about how things there are off the rail. We'll talk a little bit about untreated milk as well as part of this and the government overreach as usual. Back after this.
Our laws, as it pertains to substances, are draconian and bizarre. The psychopaths start this way.
He was an alcoholic
Because of social media and pornography, PTSD,
love addiction,
fentanyl and heroin. Ridiculous. I'm a doctor, for sake. Where the hell do you think I learned that? I'm just saying, you go to treatment before you kill people. I am a clinician. I observe things about these chemicals. Let's just deal with what's real.
We used to get these calls on Loveline all the time.
Educate adolescents and to prevent and to treat. If you have trouble you can't stop and you want to help stop it, I can help. I got a lot to say. I got a lot more to say.
I've spent most of my career dealing with illnesses that shorten life, and now we have ways to extend it and extend wellness. I've been working with the team over at V-Shred to develop a product that has everything I want in a longevity supplement. NR Boost has nicotinamide riboside. You know, metal can rust. Well, your body behaves in a similar way. It's mediated through something called NAD. NAD falls as we age, so we're less able to fight off that oxidative process. We oxidize much like that metal. And NAD fights it, but nicotinamide riboside elevates NAD so we can push back on those oxidative stressors, improving health, improving longevity. The other product is Senosync, has fisetin, one of the key molecules to fight off zombie cells, and we've added resveratrol to that, which is a well-known anti-aging antioxidant again. I don't like supplements that have a ton of ingredients. To me, it suggests that none of it's working. When I prescribe a medication, I prescribe that medicine because I expect that to work. That is exactly what I've done with these products. And I want you to go to drdrew.com/vshredmd for 10% off. Again, that is drdrew.com/vshredmd. And I take those products every single day, and I force my family to do the same, particularly my wife. As we age, it is very important that we pay attention to these things that we can pay attention to that can improve the aging process. All right, Meryl Nass, as I said, physician, scientist. She's been in the crosshairs of a lot of the controversy. Has had her... Meryl, welcome, Meryl Nass. I want to know what the update is on their attack on your board certification and your license and all the craziness that was going on in New England.
Funny you asked. I was thinking about that today. So, my license was taken away, and we brought two cases against the board, one for a malicious prosecution and one an appeal of the license. And both judges changed, in the middle of that process. And one judge heard the appeal and said he would rule by April, but hasn't. And the other one said he wasn't going to rule until he heard what happened in the appeal. So basically, I'm nowhere, and I'm pondering whether I should, harass the judge or just let it go. I think that I'm kryptonite, and none of them really want to touch my case because it's pretty open and shut, and they don't want to go against the governor. And it was, a politically motivated prosecution, I believe. And so that's the story. I think the judges don't want to touch it.
I think you have to go forward, and I think you have to find somebody to help you push it up the food chain if you need to, because the fact that this was political persecution, pure and simple, has got to be outed. We sort of have an obligation now to stand up against this bullshit. And as a peer, I am disgusted that you're put in that position. As I've explained before about Meryl, she was trained at MIT at a time when there was rigorous classical scientific training, and you did not get into medical school from MIT because the grade deflation was so severe, which means Meryl got pushed through that with her intellect and was able to get to medical school nonetheless. So that's what I know about MIT in our era. So the fact that you have been taken from our physician workforce is nothing less than disgusting and a tragedy.
Well, thanks. What can I say? I think, the universe meant me to do some different things. And because I haven't been able to focus on patients, I've been focusing on trying to fix the things we have in the world and I have this extraordinary opportunity because I've known, Mr. Kennedy for a long time, that I'm able to at least make suggestions that he listens to. So, and I've created an organization, Door to Freedom, that after we finished working on the WHO, and I feel like we defeated the WHO in the US, we're now trying to defeat the people who are taking over food and agriculture, trying to turn that into, it is already monopolized. We have an oligopoly managing basically every agricultural industry. But we are educating the public. We're about to roll out a campaign, in 2 weeks. And we want to turn that around. We want to get our antitrust lawyers at the DOJ breaking up these monopolies. And we want the government, which provides incredible subsidies this year, about $40 billion to farmers, and almost all of it goes to the richest farmers and to the corn and soy farmers. So we want to change that. We want to get it to the small family farms. We are losing 63 family farms a day in the United States, going out of business because things are so bad, and people don't realize it. But this is what's happening.
Let me dial the farm topic back because I want to address that in a few minutes. And first, flip back over to the World Health Organization and talk about public health generally. You and I have been trying to make sense of what we just went through and how crazy it was and what happened. What happened to us. And I'm increasingly convinced. I was talking to Sasha Latipova yesterday about this, that public health itself is the problem. That the very training, the people that got MPHs, the organizations around public health are not healthcare. This is the thing. They think they're healthcare. They are not healthcare. The public thinks they're healthcare. They are not healthcare. The CDC is not healthcare. It is an organization that advises and keeps track of and gives us information and makes recommendations based on that information. It's not healthcare. And we have here in this county, in LA County, our public health is run by a sociologist who has no medical training. So if that isn't enough evidence of the fact that this is not healthcare, what do we do to dial this all back? Or if you have any thoughts about it?
I agree with you that getting a master's in public health doesn't mean you really understand, what taking care of patients is like and what people need. If you've never taken care of patients. But I think the problem is even bigger than that. I think public health is a problem, but I think medicine is an equally big problem. And I'm wondering if it is that the people in both public health and medicine have been trained to be yes men, that maybe they have imposter syndrome. Medicine has become so complicated. It's impossible to master it in any field. And so doctors have thrown up their hands and said, look, I'll just do what the experts tell me because I cannot master this material. And I think it's true of public health. The way public health works in the United States is that CDC has funded the state and the local health departments. The federal government provided more than 50% of the funding for state and local health departments. So they did what CDC told them to do. And CDC had PhDs, MDs, and MPHs. But none of them, they were politically attuned. They were pushing forth a narrative, and we had a system which allowed them to push that narrative out with no pushback.
Well, what do we do though to undo this? Is it is it about public education around what public health is, so the press doesn't report it like it's some sort of on high delivery system, or do we eviscerate it in some ways so it's defanged, or do we make sure it's run by people who defangs the distribution of monies to the people that are out of control at the state level? How do we do this?
Well, we know that we're not going to get saints running our system because of the way, our leaders are chosen. So that's not going to happen. So we've got to have rules. I do believe that accountability can be attained if some people go to jail. We have to be very specific about these are the things that are criminal actions, and you go to jail. You go in front of a jury and you go to jail if you're found guilty, and that will work. But I think also doctors are required to do continuing education every year. And when it was in the CDC and FDA's interest to sell OxyContin, they forced us to do 5 hours of training on the use of OxyContin, long-acting narcotics. We were required to learn how to use them. We were told we must use them. And so I think, doctors have to do 50 hours of training every year. It is not that difficult for the federal government to require that training to consist of ethics and law. And this is what you have to do. And the fact that it's okay for you to talk back to your boss. In the United States, about 80% of doctors are salaried. They have a boss. So right now, they have to do what the boss says. They could not tell patients this vaccine could hurt you. We have to empower them somehow to be able to talk back to the boss and not be fired if they tell a patient the truth or what their opinion is.
Well, I think, once again, I think the course of the way you do that. If somebody gets fired for doing what they think is in the best interest of the patient, they should have a hell of a lawsuit on their hands against the boss. That was one of the big reveals of COVID, was finding out that 75% of our peers are employed. That was shocking to me. That was just phenomenal. I couldn't understand why they were just all falling in line and telling people to go home and come back when they're blue. That was a chapter. I mean, in the history of medicine, that chapter is ignominious. It should go down as one of the most ugliest chapters in the history of medicine. Forget everything else that happened around COVID, the vaccine mandates and the lockdowns and everything else. Just the behavior of physicians around sick patients following the on-high orders from hospital administrators. Disgusting. It was beyond belief. So that's what we've been through. And I don't know if people really understand that's what happened. But you're right. The physicians need to be empowered again. I'm not sure it's because they can't master the material. I don't like to think that. That means that we're putting substandard people into the practice of medicine and whatever, if that's what we're doing. But I want to believe that it's that we're not giving them the freedom to make clinical choices, that the electronic medical record just has a clinical pathway in it and you have to follow it, or you spend hours, filling out paperwork to justify what you did. Much like getting an insurance clearance to get a treatment for a patient that you want to do.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right about that. But what I was referring to was this proliferation of articles in the medical literature, because, you only get promoted if you publish a certain amount of articles. And so there's all sorts of problems. There's all sorts of fraud and poor science in all of this published literature, but doctors are not capable of identifying that. They just aren't. They can't, they don't have the time to go pick through the numbers of all the studies that are supposed to be teaching them how to practice medicine. And I think, I think lowering the amount of money that NIH gives out is a good thing. Publishing fewer articles, changing the way we do peer review, so that we actually have, medical literature that isn't contaminated with junk, which it is now.
Yeah.
Maybe doctors would be able to master it.
Yeah, maybe, but I want to interrupt you. And I was giving a talk one day, and Brett Weinstein ran up to me and went, "That's it. That's the problem." And what I was talking about, were you trained in biology at MIT? Was that your department?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So I was in biology at Amherst College around the same time. At that point in history, it was a very classical science training based on the classical scientific method per Francis Bacon, 1638 or whatever it was. And I have noticed, and that's what Brett Weinstein ran up to me and said, "Look, this is what people don't understand. The scientific method is this delicate instrument, and it has to be applied this exactly in the way it's designed, or it doesn't tell you anything. The null hypothesis is either informative or non-informative. That's it. And everything has to be carefully designed around that." And when I look at the data or the what's being published, it's not even science. And I actually judged a paper a publication contest one time. And I started asking questions like, did you contemplate a null hypothesis? What was your theory? What was your hypothesis coming into this? They didn't know what I was talking about. So we're not even training physicians in the scientific method. So no wonder the science is crap, because there's no science. There's actually no science in it. Now, am I right? And were you trained classically like that? And is it true that we need to get back to that instrument we call the scientific method and be applying it carefully and properly? And data analysis and big data and all that stuff, that has value. I'm not saying it's not had value. We're not doing science unless we're doing science.
Well, yeah, no, I agree with you, but I think the issue is that people do what they're paid to do, or what will get them a promotion. And right now, a lot of this so-called science is somebody gets an idea and then they get someone else and, a statistician, here are my numbers, you figure out what they mean.
Right.
Like you said, there's no real
it's
good hypothesis. And, let's look at all these different subgroups and we'll find something that's statistically significant, and then we'll talk about that. When you have Tony Fauci changing the guidepost, changing the actual endpoint of a study, it was the remdesivir study, that the endpoints had to be changed twice so that he could come up with something that says, remdesivir gets you out of the hospital quicker. I mean, when that guy is the head of NIAID doing that, the fish rots from the head. And so everybody knows that is what they are expected to do is garbage medicine or garbage science.
Wow.
Fauci was good at all, he canceled he promised to do a hydroxychloroquine study in March, I think, of 2020, when so many people were interested in that drug. And then he canceled it at the very beginning of June because presumably it was showing, the right answer. It was showing that the stuff worked. And so he had promised 2,000 patients enrolled, and he had, I think, 20. And then he canceled it and said, well, we couldn't get enough interest in people, but we have a lot of people who want to try the vaccine.
Oh, boy. Wow.
Yeah. So,
wow.
I mean, I think I think ethics, morals, compassion.
Well, maybe we start back in college, Meryl. Maybe we have to start back in college, and and by the way, virtue ethics is making a little bit of a comeback, and so we got to go back to teaching Aristotle. It seems to me, or at least Kant, whatever you want. It's just some sort of deontological virtue ethics is, I think, in order. I don't know that we could do it in medical school. They'll sit still for it, but I'm all about it. Before we get into the farm stuff, one more thing. You wrote a Substack about the World Health Organization and mind control. Tell me about this. And by the way, if you could fold into that emergencies, this whole world of emergencies now is this. This is how totalitarianism, I guess, gets going. You can just declare an emergency and do anything you want. That all must stop. But I don't know if you want to add that into the mental health story.
Sure. As you said at the beginning of this segment, the big, or as Michelle Bachmann said, the biggest problem with the two documents, the two treaties that the WHO came up with, the pandemic treaty and the IHR amendments, was that they gave Tedros, the head or anyone who's the head of the WHO, the opportunity to declare an emergency for anything he wanted at any time, basically.
Right.
As long as he could say it had to do with health. So, and with One Health, climate is health, anything is health. And so and he could, and there were no standards, and he could declare it over or not whenever he wanted. And once he had declared an emergency, then he could tell the rest of the world what to do with that emergency. So that was a huge problem. And, I don't think that was his idea. I think this was a very carefully thought out plan of globalists to use emergencies to gain more power and control over the nations of the world. Now, what did you ask me about that? What was the other thing you said?
Well, the mental health, the mind control, mental health advocate.
WHO, interestingly, in addition to coming up with this concept of One Health, which allows them to throw everything in the world into the basket of health, they also decided that there were two important areas of healthcare that were missing in the world. We didn't have enough of them. And one was basically fertility, female health. And so they were very interested in providing abortion and birth control methods around the world, even in countries that don't believe in them. And additionally, they were interested in mental health care. This is what they've said for the last 3 years. We've got to have international ability to provide basically primary mental health care and primary women's health, which meant mostly abortions and birth control. So I thought that was interesting. And the fact that they've been defunded, their funding is like half of what it was. They've had to fire a lot of people. And yet this week, they've come out again and said, we've got 1 billion people on the planet who have mental health issues and we must start treating them. And so you know what that means. That means give them drugs, numb them. And make them easier to control.
We have this crazy situation. Well, I don't know about that, but if you get them in some sort of, psychology has been captured. They just when they train psychologists now, they train them that if you understood that you were a colonized victim, your mental health problems would go away. If you understand the extent to which that perpetrates your psyche. Oh, that's psychology now. And so that's what they want, Meryl. That's what they want to get into, because that involves mind control, right? The medication, I'm not enthusiastic about it. We have this crazy thing in this country where we both undertreat and overtreat simultaneously. It's the craziest damn thing. I don't know how we get it exactly wrong like that, because there are so many people with massive, serious mental illness that get no care or are not permitted to get care because providers aren't permitted to give them care because, hey man, who are you? Number one. And by the same token, every, middle-aged individual that feels a little, blue gets plastered on a medication that changes who they are a little bit. So it's odd. It's just so odd. And then the psychostimulants and I can't. But it's not, again, not good medicine, right? If you left it up to let the individuals actually take care of the patients, I would argue we'd have better healthcare going on. Let them make the referrals to the mental health professionals. And so anyway, all right. So let's switch gears. The World Health Organization makes me absolutely crazy. I don't understand how we could go from bad to worse. We could take a public health system that has damaged children in the COVID pandemic and decide, oh, you know what, that was so great. Let's get a bigger thing going. Let's get it going worldwide. It's just too much. So, by the way, I was thinking about Bobby. If you can get his ear about mental health, they're going to they've got to do something systematic there. And I know he's very interested in the addiction side, and he's a little naive about. I love his idea about the farms, but we've let people get so sick that getting people into condition where they can tolerate going to these farms that he imagines it's going to take a lot of resources because they are so ill now. Talk about farming. So you wrote another article about how we move to regenerative and organic farming. What do we do? Critical farming crisis. And Caleb, I almost wonder, is Alison nearby? Can we kind of bring her in to listen to Meryl's Substack here? Or is she still away?
Yes, I see her. She's still nearby. She's listening.
Is she listening? If you're listening, Alison, hop on in and I'll have you sort of listen to this Substack and let you kind of ring into Meryl's thesis here. Go ahead. There you are. Welcome. So Meryl, tell us about that article.
Well, I'm sorry, I don't know which one you mean, but
this is it's titled "In the Midst of a Critical Farming Crisis, the question is, what is the future for farming?" The Heritage Center is partnering with MAHA, recognizing the tough situation we're in to make new alliances.
Yes, thank you. So a lot of people are looking for healthier food, don't want food that is GMO, that have on which glyphosate or other herbicides and pesticides have been used. And the question is, how can farmers, and farmers are having trouble also. So farmers who are using the GMOs, who are growing corn this year, for example, are losing $100 an acre on corn because we've overproduced it. And we've overproduced it because the government has incentivized its use. It's a very complicated system, but the USDA provides various incentives. And one of them is called crop insurance. And that means if you can get crop insurance and then you lose your crop because of floods or droughts or pests, you can get paid for that crop. And the government pays about 62% of the cost of crop insurance. So that's a big subsidy for the farmers who can get it. But you can only get it if you are using the standard methods, which means GMO crops and pesticides. So anyway, what you put up a different thing, a different slide. Which, yeah. So this slide reveals, and these are USDA numbers, that 140 that in the 5 years between 2017 and 2022. 142,000 farms went under and 20 million acres of land stopped being farmed in the United States. And that's because they couldn't make money. Now, why couldn't they make money? They couldn't make money because the prices of these crops like soybeans and corn and wheat were down, and the prices of the inputs to grow them, the seeds, the pesticides, the fertilizers, the tractors, et cetera, were up. So prices have gone up 30 to 40% since the start of COVID for the inputs that farmers need, and yet the crop prices have not gone up. They went up in 2022, and now everything has come down again. What this slide shows you, and again, this is from the USDA today, they published these numbers today, is that income from farming, which is the column on the left, is actually negative and has been negative for the last 5 years. So farmers are going under unless one or two people in the family has an outside job and can bring in the outside income. So the middle column is for the 5 different years from 2021 through 2025, what farmers have earned from their outside, their non-farm income. And then the column on the right basically is adding in and then dividing it to average it out, the government subsidies. So government provides subsidies to farmers in terms of crop insurance and other kinds of subsidies. And so that adds $10,000 or $20,000 on average to each farmer's income in each of those years. And this year it will add more because Trump has raised the subsidies to about $40 billion for this year alone for farmers. But almost all of the subsidies go to the largest and richest farmers, and have done so for the last 29 years. And so
how do you parse that out? How do you get that distributed elsewhere?
So it's really complicated.
Economics works, right?
Right. Yeah. So on the one hand, monopolies can work so we have oligopolies in the industry, in the farming industries. So meat processing, for example, is controlled by 4 companies. 85% of beef in the United States is processed by 4 companies. And so they decide how much to pay the farmer. And so farmers can't win in that system. Well, in terms of the fertilizer and the pesticides, Monsanto, now Bayer, controls the seeds and the pesticides and often the fertilizers. Right. So the farmer is squeezed in that way. The John Deere controls the tractors, and now they won't let the farmers repair their own tractors. They have to bring them into so that there are all these different ways farmers are being squeezed. Now, what the government did. Yeah.
Go ahead. Government.
So it's
because the government, when the government puts its hand on the scale, that's where the market falls apart always. So they did to medicine.
Right.
They put their hand on the scale, and that's why I want to bring Alison in, because in a normal business cycle, the small farmer like Alison would be able to come in, and we would be motivated to go support them. But when the government's got its hand on the scale, how does she compete?
Exactly. So one way the government has put its hand on the scale is through controlling meat. So you cannot, so if you're a farmer and you want to butcher a cow and sell it to consumers, you're not allowed to do that. You must process your cow through either a state or federal inspected facility. And so 98 to 99% of meat goes through federally inspected facilities. There are very few of them in the East. There are a few massive ones that process over 1 million cows a year. You often have to make an appointment 1 to 2 years in advance to get a spot. And then if the prices are low, when your turn is ready, you're stuck with those prices. That's a mess. So what we are trying to do is to get the government's hand off that scale. And there are several bills that have been introduced and one that's going to be introduced to help do that. So one would allow local custom butcher shops to actually start selling meat within a state, as long as the state allows it, that we would take the federal regulations away from that. One would allow state-inspected facilities to sell their meat interstate. And right now, they're restricted to selling only within the state. What we would like is a bill that would allow the farmer to sell right from his farm. So if you drove to his farm to get the meat, you knew it was good, you trusted that farmer, there would be no reason for government to interfere with that interaction. As I said, with the crop insurance, so government will also pay farmers not to grow. They have conservation programs. Well, what works for the government and what works for the banks is to do a few big deals rather than loads of little deals. Right?
Of course. Right.
And because there's so much paperwork involved, the little guy doesn't have the time to figure out all this detailed paperwork. So what the farmers say now is that they're farming the government, right? That many farmers, not the very small ones who aren't involved with this, but the big ones are actually the way they maintain profitability is through their government subsidies. And without them, they would go under too.
We'll just call it what it is, fascism. There we go. So people will love that term if you apply it to farming. Maybe that'll get them worked up about it. Let's bring in Alison Morrow, who is one of these farmers. Alison, I appreciate you being here again. And I have to go. Where is Alison? Let's see if we can get her in.
I'm here. How do I get? There we go.
And I'm sure this, you hear everything that's going on that Alison is talking, that Meryl's talking about. Give me just a brief reaction, then I have to go to break, and then I'll bring you both back. So your reaction to what she is saying.
This is how we got the American food system, with people who are some of the fattest and sickest in the entire world. And when you hear that the government's going to protect us and keep us safe and keep our food safe, all you have to do is look left and right at the grocery store and decide if the facts check out. That's all I have to say about that.
Well, and I want to hear, when we get back, I want to hear your story about how you compete with these, big giant organizations that have efficiencies and have government backing, and how you go about that. And is it the goodwill of the customer who's willing to pay a little more or support you or something? I don't know. I don't know what it looks like from your perspective. Meryl, I feel like you wanted to say something before I go out.
So yes, so what people need to understand is what the government has incentivized and basically demanded of the farmers is that they produce excess amounts of soy and corn and wheat, and demands that they use the GMO seeds and the herbicides and pesticides. And then the excess amounts of those products are being fed to the livestock that we're going to eat. And what else can be done with them? They get turned into fake food. They get turned into food without nourishment.
What Bobby calls food-like substances, which I love that term. That's what he calls it, which is a perfect way of describing these things that are non-nutrient available. All right, we'll take a little break. You guys stay with me, and do pay attention to those of you who are watching the stream, the people that support us, or they're important to us. And we'll be back with Meryl Nass and Alison Morrow right after this. I'm excited to bring you a new product, a new supplement, Fatty. I take it. I make Susan take it. My whole family takes it. This comes out of, believe it or not, dolphin research. The Navy maintains a fleet of dolphins. and a brilliant veterinarian recognized that these dolphins sometimes developed a syndrome identical to our Alzheimer's disease. Those dolphins were deficient in a particular fatty acid. She replaced the fatty acid, and they didn't get the Alzheimer's. Humans have the same issue, and we are more deficient in this particular fatty acid than ever before. And a simple replacement of this fatty acid called C15 will help us prevent these syndromes. It's published in a recent journal called Metabolites. It's a new nutritional C15, pentadecanoic acid, it's called. The deficiency that we are developing for C15 creates something called the cellular fragility syndrome. This is the first nutritional deficiency syndrome to be discovered in 75 years and may be affecting us in many ways, and as many as 1 in 3 of us. This is an important breakthrough. Take advantage of it. Go to fatty15.com/Dr. Drew to receive 15% off a 90-day starter kit subscription, or use code Dr. Drew at checkout for that 15% off, or just go to our website, drdrew.com/fatty15. Weight loss and gum loss, the Wellness Company's got you covered with new products. Drop. It's for aggressive appetite control. It comes in easy-to-use liquid drops. No prescription, no painful shot. It is an oral peptide called retatrutide. It actually mimics the way the body naturally loses weight, and it is designed to support faster, more focused weight loss when combined with healthy eating and exercise. And Smile, it's a breakthrough fluoride-free peptide toothpaste. It gently whitens and reverses gum loss, actually rebuilding tissue at its source with a proprietary blend of peptides, remineralizers, and soothing botanicals. Go to drdrew.com/TWC for more information on Drop and Smile, and check out another new and innovative solution for hair loss called Roots while you're there. That's drdrew.com/TWC for 10% off. What's so special about Paleo Valley's grass-fed and finished bone broth and superfood bars? Well, everything. All are delicious, high in nutrients, low in calories, and contain nothing artificial. Co-founder Autumn Smith on what goes into every superfood bar.
So we have bone broth protein powder, and then we've added other superfoods, cashew butter, we have spirulina in there, acerola, broccoli powder, kale, blueberries. And so it really is kind of just an infusion of superfoods with every bite.
And then there's the extraordinary bone broth protein made with an ancestral approach that boosts our collagen intake.
Collagen is something that's gone by the wayside in our modern diet because we don't eat nose to tail anymore, but it was something we ate a lot of, and it has so many benefits. So if you have sagging skin, joint pain, gut issues, your decreased bone mineral density, slow to heal your wounds, slow recovery, these are all things that collagen can dramatically improve. If we're not giving our body the building blocks to produce it, we just age more rapidly. It also improves sleep, improves blood sugar control. So it's essentially like the Swiss Army knife of healthy aging.
Like I said, Paleo Valley's bone broth is something special. Make Paleo Valley part of your longevity regimen. Go to drdrew.com/Paleo Valley for 20% off when you subscribe and 15% off your first order. That is drdrew.com/Paleo Valley.
Ask Dr. Drew.
I have no idea who Dr. Drew is.
He's been watching a lot of Dr. Drew lately.
Dr. Drew.
And I had my bone broth in my Bobby Kennedy cup just before the show started today. We were speaking to Meryl Nass and Alison Morrow. Guys, thank you for being here, and welcome back. So, Alison, I wanted to get your take on what Meryl was talking about, because you're the one attempting to do this, and maybe give people a primer on, give them 2 minutes on why you took this on, and what I'm just so curious what it looks like from your perspective.
Oh, well, and if people don't know, I went from being a TV journalist to being a farmer with a quick stint in government work where I got fired over my COVID interviews with, people like Dr. Drew questioning the narrative. So I don't know. I just can't stay out of trouble. I just picked this next adventure, I guess, because I just like to, I like feisty opportunities. We basically now are milking goats. We drink milk right out of the goat. I can't
stay out of trouble is why I went into farming.
I guess so.
What are you doing in Washington?
I know. Well, we're in Washington right now. We came back to Washington. We live in Florida. Washington State, actually, let's just talk real fast about their rules right now around raw milk, okay? In Washington, you can buy milk. You call it untreated milk. Raw. We call it raw milk, right? It's unpasteurized milk.
Yeah.
You can buy it here for human consumption. In Florida, it's a pet food. It's labeled a pet food. So in Florida, the government does not regulate raw milk. In Washington, you have to do a lot of testing and follow a specific set of rules. Where this starts to get dicey is if you're somebody, for instance, who has one cow, and I know there are lots of people like this actually, you have one cow, and you have a few neighbors who want to buy a couple extra gallons off you. Your cow's producing 5 gallons a day. You only need 1 gallon a day. Should you be able to sell your neighbor that extra couple gallons of milk without the government being involved? Here's the problem. If the government gets involved, you've got to have certain structures. You have to have certain water running outside. You have to have structures that are meant for a larger dairy. And so someone who is only producing a couple gallons of milk cannot sustain this. That drives them into a black market, essentially, which is where a lot of people do sell. And you just hope you're not going to get in trouble. Or you just go out of business and then your neighbors are left looking for a larger dairy and a larger dairy and a larger dairy. And so Washington right now, where we are visiting, where my daughter's the flower girl in our old babysitter's wedding. We moved from Washington to Florida a couple years ago. It's a very different world. In Florida, I thought when I moved there that people wanted to sell for human consumption. They just looked down on it in Florida. And so nobody got that right. But now it's very obvious to me that people just want the government off their back because there are a lot of people who have a cow. They want to be able to sell to their family members. They've got an aunt or uncle down the street or a neighbor, and they don't want the government in their business. I don't know what you think about that. I'm not sure.
Well, listen, that's my jam. But the goats are even more likely to have brucella and things like that. Do they get up your tuchus about that?
You know what? Well, I had actually never heard of brucella in Florida for goats, but we chose to test our goats. We don't sell milk. Okay. We barely produce enough to feed our family. But someday, I don't know. It's to be honest with you, it's scary I just be flat honest. It is a scary world to get into because anytime somebody gets sick, I've heard from people that as soon as you have like an E. coli or Campylobacter or something like that, the health department will ask, do you drink raw milk? It's like one of the first things that they'll ask you. They won't ask, did you have clam chowder last night? Or, at a restaurant, did you wash your hands after you went to the bathroom? Anything like that, because raw milk really has a target on its back. It's fascinating. When I worked in the news business, when the media liked a particular product, let's talk about an injection over the last few years, they would overlook all kinds of risks and negative consequences for that particular product because they like the product.
Why?
Because they're like all in on it. They love it. They want it to sell.
Is it hypnosis? Is it
yes.
Are they just sort of a group thing, hypnotic and whatever?
Yes.
Well, let me bring Meryl in because this I would hope, Meryl, that this would be sort of informative for you hearing Alison's story.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. There was actually a guy in the next town from me in Blue Hill that was milking one cow, and we're allowed to sell raw milk, but the state came in, and shut him down. And as I said, you cannot legally sell a piece of a lamb to your neighbor, really anywhere in the country without meeting all sorts of requirements and having the animal processed in a USDA inspected facility. You have to get the government stamp of approval. That's why we used to have local butchers, and we don't anymore. You may have noticed that. I do remember when your mother went to the butcher and told him what cuts she wanted, and he'd go in the back or in the front and cut it up for you. So dairy is an issue. Alison's absolutely right. There has been a war on raw milk for the last 40 years. The FDA has been responsible for that. We are trying to turn that around because if you sell raw milk, you have to be really careful with it because you're not pasteurizing it. So it has to be done very, very cleanly. If you are selling pasteurized milk, it can be very dirty because it gets pasteurized and it gets mixed together. The dairy industry in this country has gotten extraordinarily consolidated. So that, there are just a few companies, and their milk from hundreds and hundreds of dairies will be mixed together. And then through this pasteurization process, they, wave a magic wand over it and say it's okay. And generally you don't get sick. Now, what happens when you drink the raw milk, people tell me, and I've become now a raw milk proponent, having learned all this, is that it's filled with proteins and other substances that are very good for you that people have been drinking throughout history that for some reason the government doesn't want you to have anymore. And you have to ask yourself why.
Mm-hmm.
Right. People understand
why
there's when somebody says I eat raw almonds, nobody gasps and says, I can't believe you eat raw almonds or raw spinach. But if you drink raw milk, people look at you like you're crazy. Obviously, people understand that there are benefits to eating a product that is unprocessed and not treated at high temperatures. But when it comes to milk, the government says it's exactly the same. That's one of their main messaging points. Every time the media runs the sound bites from the Department of Health about raw milk, they say there's just no reason to drink it because it's exactly the same. And so it just makes us all look like we're just crazy people who jump out of airplanes all the time for no reason. It's like, without a parachute, why are you so crazy jumping out of an airplane without a parachute? Because it's exactly the same.
What's interesting to me is that a lot of these sort of nonsensical policies are things that came out of earlier in the 20th century when they made sense, and they just have stayed in place ever since and no longer make sense. And on top of that, we have this very bizarre, in this country, risk intolerance. Like, we're not allowed to be biological. We're not allowed to get sick. We're not allowed to take any risk. And daddy government needs to take care of that, make sure of it. No risk. And we'll never die.
Well,
don't ever die. It's just insane.
We are willing to take the risk if the consequences come in 10 or 20 years. Look at all of the ultra processed foods that people are eating. That's going to give you cancer or some kind of issue at some point, but the risk is not near term. Obviously, yes, if you're going to get a foodborne illness in the short term, which, like, I might as well add, during COVID, I remember interviewing people about making your own baby formula because there was a huge baby formula shortage due to, I believe it was an E. coli outbreak, but nobody was questioning why someone would feed their baby formula. But with raw milk, they do that. And I really do not quite understand exactly why raw milk is treated so differently. I have some theories about it. I don't know if you guys think that is it a political thing? Is it a spiritual thing? I mean, why raw milk?
It's anything. First of all, anything with cooties or gross immediately has a bizarre energy around it. So infectious disease generally in this country, it's almost like you're sinful, or there's an ideology that immediately comes up where you're dirty, you're sinful, all these crazy bullshit ideas start to creep in, the emotions and the ideology around these products. Meryl, do you have any thoughts about the raw milk?
Yeah. So the CDC is only concerned about acute illness, as you said, acute foodborne illness. They're big on that. And so the whole country has been geared up. CDC has a massive, communications department. They spin narratives, like it's gold. I mean, that is what they do. They are control the narrative people. That is what that agency is about. And so you'll hear all this stuff about acute foodborne illnesses, particularly because they had in Florida a case, and they claimed that E. coli and something else grew out of the same milk, which apparently I asked an expert microbiologist on milk who said she'd never heard of that before. So, they want that narrative that raw milk is dangerous. Now, it could be because they don't want us getting the benefits of raw milk. It could be they believe it. It could be that all the rules have been written by lobbyists for the big milk industry. And that's where it's coming from, because the lobbyists are writing most of the regulations these days.
Right. And the average dairy farmer in these big commercial dairies is going broke. They are making almost no money. And I'm not saying the raw dairy farmers are making a ton of money, but they're selling for 2-3 times a gallon what the Dairy Gold or whatever other dairy farmer is making. I know those farmers used to report on them when I was in Washington State. There's quite a few of them out here, and they were barely making ends meet. And they couldn't believe people would pay $15, $16, $20 a gallon for milk, for raw milk, but that is what the raw milk consumer is willing to do. I think you're right, Dr. Nass, that the lobbyists have a lot to do with it. I also, frankly, think there's a little bit of this. We tried to save you with our science. We tried to save you with pasteurizations or vaccines or whatever else it was. And you're just ungrateful. You're like an ungrateful child who cannot get on board with all these advancements. And there's a little bit of a God complex, I think,
Alison,
with it too.
But Alison, I bet you thought you were going to the free state of Florida to do your farming. And God knows, you mentioned before the show that Florida has its own unique, there's lots of critters there, both insect and animal, I'm sure. But the point I want to make is Joe Latipo just today took away vaccine mandates. And that was a major deal, I think. I don't know if you guys saw that.
He actually wrote
publicly.
He wrote publicly in support of our right to choose to drink raw milk. And he even said for health benefits. I was like, wow, it's amazing that, but the Department of Health in Florida is the total opposite. And Dr. Nass brought up this recent case, which is extremely sketchy, of Keeley Farms Dairy, which I will tell you, I know from behind the scenes that the Department of Health went to the media first, and she found out about their investigation from Bloomberg or, another reporter. They never even told her. And secondly, they've never tested her milk. They never went to, according to my sources, they never went to her farm and tested her milk to make sure that, this bacteria that they're saying caused these illnesses over 8 months, by the way, 8 months, and she's still selling. They haven't shut her down. They never talked to her apparently about any of this, but she's so dangerous. The whole situation is just very weird. I mean, what else would you investigate and basically ruin someone's entire business? I know she's had to fire almost every single one of her employees. She had like 12 employees. She only has one now. Barely able to keep things afloat, selling off her cows because she's been charged guilty in the court of public opinion because the Department of Health and the media work lockstep together. I used to be a journalist who believed the Department of Health was here to help us. I maligned doctors in the name of the Department of Health until I woke up and realized what they were up to. And so it doesn't even matter in some of these cases, in particular in raw milk, if you're even guilty, because they will just ruin your name with the media. And then it doesn't matter anymore whether you were really at fault for what
Alison,
people say. Yes.
I am so interested in people's transformation. That's one of the sort of I don't know, I've become preoccupied with that a little bit. So what were you thinking when you maligned doctors, and how did you malign them? And then what was and what did you think when you woke up? Did you apologize? How does that work?
Oh, it is difficult. It is a difficult pill to swallow because the actions that I took had real consequences for people, real patients and real lives that were denied treatment because I basically just was a mouthpiece for the Department of Health. And in one particular case, which is the most egregious, they said that there was a doctor here in Washington who was experimenting on his patients. And it was really false. This guy he was an oncology naturopath. He was basically, I'm sure you know the science behind this better, but he was taking these patients who have been denied, the Seattle Care Alliance Cancer Care was saying, you're going to die in 3 months. There's nothing we can do for you. So he was getting patients that were told they were terminal. There was no hope for them.
Right.
He was taking proteins from their urine and their blood, somehow souping them up in a lab and then shooting them back into them. And I met these patients after my terrible news report because they were so upset that I said, look, he's experimenting on his patients, shut him down. The Department of Health should shut him down. They were like, look, I've had melanoma. 10 years ago, they told me I had 3 months to live. I had multiple myeloma. I was told I had 6 months to live. I'm here 12 years later. Let me go see this doctor. I want his treatment. But the Department of Health took all of their treatments and threw them away. And people died. And when I was sent out to his office, they had sent out the press release. This is how it works. They sent out the press release at 5:00 at night. So you can't get the doctor's statement. Then my bosses say, go out and stand outside his office and you're live at 10 and 11. You have no idea what this guy is going to say because you can't get a hold of him, but you have the press release from the Department of Health. So you assume that they're telling the truth and you're here to protect people. So you go stand outside and with no comment from the doctor, you just say, we were unable to reach him. Of course we couldn't because we didn't try during office hours. We didn't care to wait to do the story. You completely ruin the guy's reputation. And the next day, the doctor maybe will call you and say, hey, that was an unfair report. And in that particular case, when I finally met those patients, I thought, oh my gosh, I mean, that was serious. That was really serious. And I'm telling you, fool me once, you will not do it again. So that was a real wake up call for the Department of Health. When I saw how that all worked behind the scenes and how we were used with these press releases to just go out there and insert ourselves between the doctor and patient in that relationship, I was just, that was the beginning, I think, really of the end of my career.
It's not just public health. It's insurance companies, it's regulators, it's medical boards, it's professional societies. Meryl, am I overstating that? They all use the same kinds of techniques, and the press
giving them instructions.
Yeah, I was going to, and the press is their cudgel. The press is the weapon, and it's really. Thank God they're failing. You know that now we have stuff like this where people can go for long form interviews and really listen to things. And those of us that have kind of woken up to what's the excesses of what's been going on. And just free speech itself is helping solve the problem. But there's no free speech in mainstream media. You're if you don't toe their line, you're not even allowed in, let alone an opportunity to speak. So as you both know, Alison, you have a thought there.
Right. And I just want people to understand that the problem is far worse than the money that the pharmaceutical companies pay, for instance, in newsrooms, which is a problem. But the problem is not so much that the journalist gets the money from it. It's that they are brainwashed by the same commercials, by the same propaganda that everybody else is. And so over time, if that was a huge change a couple decades ago when you could question vaccines, for instance, in newsrooms, and I was told outright that I could not discuss vaccines in my newsroom because I dared to suggest we go interview a pediatrician who thought parents should maintain exemption rights for their kids to go to school. That was complete anathema. And so for that, I was castigated and told that I couldn't even on a lunch break discuss vaccines with a coworker. And it wasn't because my boss was rich from Pfizer money. It was because he was bought in. I mean, you didn't have to force him to say anything. He believed it all. And that problem is so much harder to solve. It's so much harder to solve the problem of the zombie journalist or the zombie doctor. Actually, it's worse than zombie. It's the martyr zombie journalist or the martyr zombie doctor who doesn't know what they're talking about, but is trying to save the world with their lack of knowledge. That is really scary.
The martyr zombie, and I feel I've seen you leaning in, Meryl. Did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think that's right. Just like these op-eds that we've been seeing in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Washington Post, we get these doctors who say, "I devoted myself to serving the people," and now Bobby Kennedy is destroying healthcare in the United States, and none of them, I mean, they really do have a martyr complex, and yet they were paid. They were salaried, and for instance, Rochelle Walensky's husband got $16 million in contracts from Fauci the year before, in 2019, before she came on, or 2020, I think, but she came on in 2021. So in 2020, her husband's business got $16 million in contracts from Fauci so that she would play along. She did what she was told, and she's still playing the martyr. Well, give back the $16 million to the taxpayer, Rochelle. Maybe that would make you a martyr.
I think the good rule of thumb is any time there's an impulse to restrict personal freedom on behalf of the press or the healthcare system, whether it's your freedom to maintain your bodily autonomy, freedom to make your own decisions, freedom to speak. Whenever there's an infringement, this is the genius of our government. It's a bellwether. It tells us. It's a guidepost that tells us if there's an infringement on one of these things, something is terribly wrong. I mean, it's really a natural law violation, frankly, when you get right to it. It's mere natural law. As a former professor of mine has titled his book, Mere Natural Law should no longer be mere, M-E-R-E. It should be profound. It should be followed. It should be cherished. It should be protected. And mere natural law is what is being violated all over the place. So we should have a visceral, Meryl, we started this conversation by talking about moral and ethics. We should have a visceral response when mere natural law is violated, because it's a profound thing. And Alison, that's what you're talking about. You're talking about circumstances where that is violated. Alison, you respond.
It is truly crazy to me to think, and I have this thought, that at some point, not only will people be barred from selling healthy food to someone who lives next door, but I truly believe there will be a day, if we don't stand up against this, that someone can come on my farm and tell me I can't even go out to my own barn, or that I could be charged with, criminal child abuse or something because my daughter milks the goats and we drink milk from our goat,
Alison,
which people have done. Yeah.
Had I not just gone through COVID, I went, Alison, we got to worry about this one. No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely correct. You're absolutely correct. That I now know that that's the government we have. I didn't know, but now we should all know that.
And they use, like you said, they use these emergencies, the same thing with the raw milk stuff. They use it to descend upon you and say, okay, look, this is a real problem, whether it really is or not. And so we're going to protect you. And here's the way we're going to protect you. And so they throw you this lifeline. Okay, please, thank you. You letting us still operate. We can stay in business. And so then the velvet handcuffs come on. And before you know it, we have the food system that we have today. What should people do? Yeah, when you want to eat real food, nutrient dense food that has not been ultra processed so that you'll get sick 20 years from now, and there's always a risk in eating, especially raw foods, then know your farmer and go to their actual property, see what's going on there, and support the right to at least do business on private property. As of today, I don't know, in some states, maybe not California, Dr. Drew, there's still an inkling that private property is a place where somebody can do business and produce food. And so if you can look up, there are plenty of websites. I know, probably not in California. I'm not sure if that much longer in Florida. But if more people do it and the money goes in that direction, then I do think at least we can stave off some of the pressure. But there are plenty of websites out there just to look them up. Look up and with your dollar. I mean, yes, it's a lot easier to go to the grocery store. Sometimes I go to the grocery store. I'm not hating on people who go to the grocery store, but if you want to get very high quality beef, for instance, like Dr. Nass is saying, okay, I just got an extremely healthy pig butchered. I didn't raise the pig. I didn't get it USDA certified, because what I did was I bought the pig from my friend and then I paid the butcher to butcher my pig. And so that's happening all over the place, and you will never get that quality at a cost efficient price unless you know the person who raised it. That's the way to do it.
That's what that's what we've started doing with the wellness company. We actually go pick the cow, have it slaughtered, and sent directly to the customer. And that's the way it needs to be done. Alison, I'm going to let you go. I want to finish up with Meryl here. I appreciate you joining me today. And as always, speaking your mind, keep doing it. Keep staying in trouble. You can't stay out. That's good. So I seem to have the same problem. So we'll talk soon. Me. Okay.
Bye.
You betcha. And then, Meryl, I want to finish this conversation with what you said about ethics and morality. I feel like we came all the way back to that topic, and that's sort of the big theme here that is sort of, we need a return to mere natural law. How do we do so? And what is your sense of what that is?
Well, of course, we used to teach the Constitution in school, and we don't. And so I remember during Obama writing a letter to the editor saying, these are the 10 Bill of Rights, and 5 of these are being abrogated right now. We're transgressing. We're breaking 5 of the 10 Bill of Rights, and we shouldn't be doing that. And then I realized that nobody really knows what's in the Bill of Rights anymore, or the other 17 or so amendments to the Constitution. And we have to, so people don't know where to draw the line. So there was no line. So when COVID happened, the government could do anything to us, and people accepted it because they didn't realize it was illegal, it was immoral, and unconstitutional. This business about the pesticide bill that was just snuck into the appropriations bill a few weeks ago. which would give Bayer Monsanto a way out of having to deal with people suing it for failure to warn about cancer. So that bill would basically take away the failure to warn doctrine from all pesticides. And who knows that, again, in the amendments to the Constitution, in the Bill of Rights, there's an amendment that says, look, if you think someone's taken something away from you worth $20 or more, you have the right to a jury trial to try to get justice for that. And so the government sort of granting industries, they've already granted it to the vaccine industry for children, the right not to have to be accountable for your mistakes, because we're not going to allow anyone to sue you, because we need the children's vaccines, and you threatened us that you would go out of business if you had to deal with the lawsuits. So we took away the lawsuits, and now the pesticide industry wants the same thing, and the government, through our legislators, may give it to them. That's unconstitutional. It was unconstitutional for the vaccines, and it's unconstitutional for the pesticides. Have you seen any media mention that?
No, of course not. But I will tell you, as it pertains to all this topic, I just got my digital version of the New England Journal of Medicine, and the second lead article is the corporatization deal, healthcare investors and the profit priority. And it is taking it on a bit. I just glanced at what the sort of what the sort of headlines are in it, and it's saying, hey, maybe we've gone too far, essentially. But we'll see. I again, it's keep speaking up. Meryl, I appreciate you joining me. I appreciate all your Substacks. I have to kind of wrap this up. Where would you like most people to find you? We got Nass Meryl on X. The Substack, I imagine, is where you want to send most people?
Yeah, so merylnass.substack.com or Meryl's Chaos newsletter. And we will be rolling out a very big educational program on the crisis in farming and food and the ways we're going to have to fix it or try to fix it. And this is our opportunity with Bobby Kennedy, in Washington. He really cares about this. As I said before, let me just finish one thing from earlier. The soy, the corn are used not only to make grainy materials, but also to make the bad oils that are in all the ultra-processed foods. And so these are the polyunsaturated oils that we don't want, and we don't want to give our children. And so we got to get rid of those government subsidies for those products and encourage farmers, instead of disincentivizing them, to grow a variety of fruits. And 60% of our fruits are imported. 35% of our vegetables are imported. We got to be growing them here again. They've been coming in for 30 years with no tariffs, just coming across the border for free, and obviously putting farmers out of business. So tariffs aren't all bad.
I think Trump would be very interested in all that. Bring not just manufacturing home, but farming home. Meryl, thank you so much as always. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
You got it. All right. So I believe tomorrow, we have Salty Cracker coming in here, which should be fun. A lot going on. I was with Adam Carolla today. I was just saying how so much stuff is going on. It's hard to keep track of everything. Zach Levi and Batya Ungar Sargon is coming in on the 16th. We've got a little flexibility in the schedule coming up that week because of some travel. Joe Latipo himself is going to come here and he'll talk about his removal of the vaccine mandates. And I know Emily Barsh is very hard at work getting this scheduled together. We've got a lot of great potential guests. For instance, Roseanne guaranteed us that she 1,000% will be in next week. So she's moved her schedule 3 times now. So Roseanne, I'll give you proper crap about that when you come here. But we still love you and want to have you. Caleb, anything on your frontier?
Nope, just excited for your birthday tomorrow, day with Salty Cracker. So I'm sure he's going to make that real interesting.
Yeah, it will be very interesting. All right, so we will see you tomorrow at 2 o'clock Pacific time. Ask Dr. Drew is produced by Caleb Nation and Susan Pinsky. As a reminder, the discussions here are not a substitute for medical care, diagnosis, or treatment. This show is intended for educational and informational purposes only. I am a licensed physician, but I am not a replacement for your personal doctor, and I am not practicing medicine here. Always remember that our understanding of medicine and science is constantly evolving. Though my opinion is based on the information that is available to me today, some of the contents of this show could be outdated in the future. Be sure to check with trusted resources in case any of the information has been updated since this was published. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, don't call me, call 911. If you're feeling hopeless or suicidal, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255. You can find more of my recommended organizations and helpful resources at drdrew.com/help.